to hear it. I was going to put in the email, bring snacks, but I thought that might be, and Garrett read my mind and brought snacks. So we've got.
So if you guys want any cookies,
There's cookies.
I'll sherp them
There's
down your
cookies
way.
from the seal. Oh,
Wow. It's a
thank you for reading my mind.
brown nose in every group.
Yep. Food goes
Welcome
to the heart.
to the December meeting of the local planning committee. I was thinking about if anyone got the opportunity to be in town this weekend, it was remarkable
Yeah.
to see all that went on.
Yeah.
And from the stroll and the elementary school choir singing at the stroll, and the 204 hopping on Saturday, and the town band and the garden club at the community center, and all of the things that we are working on, to see all this sort of thriving and such amazing institutions of our community really thriving. I think it really underscored to me why we're doing this. So I hope some of you got to enjoy some of that, because it was really cool what was going on in town this week. So yay. And to make it even better, we go on. I think our first order of business is to review and approve the minutes. Thank you, Barbara, for them. We appreciate them.
Sorry.
No, it's the,
That BCC thing is not functioning correctly.
it can be tricky depending on what email platform you're using. I am trying to use the iCloud, and it's a geeky around that as well, so I identify my iCloud email. I think everyone got them by email?
Yep.
Good. Any questions, concerns? I would move approval. You're making a motion from the floor? Okay.
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Beautiful. We have ratified the November 1st minutes. Yay. The second thing on the agenda is the Cape Cod Commission. Chloe Schaefer, thank you, Margot, for connecting us. It's spectacular. She is the planning director at the Cape Cod Commission. She and I had a lovely chat. She's very excited we're undertaking this process. She provided us with the documents that are in our G Drive that I found very, very helpful. She or her staff member is going to come visit with us and chat in January at our January meeting. So that's really great. That's on the agenda. So just for everyone's date, that is the 3rd, Tuesday, December 3rd, 5 to 7. Because Monday is the official New Year's holiday, the Board of Selectmen are meeting in this room, so we will be in the Griffin room, or in the smaller room, excuse me. We will not be here.
Second. This January 2nd.
Is the official New Year's holiday?
Right,
Because
so we're meeting Tuesday. the
we're
3rd.
meeting Tuesday the 3rd, but the selectmen, yeah.
And
They
then
had, so the selectmen are gonna be in this room, so we will be in the little room, and we're delighted to have the Cape Cod Commission visiting.
Will there be a dial-in for that? I'm gonna be in Florida. so-
Sure, we love the go-to meeting. We will do it,
All right, thank you.
yeah, absolutely.
I'll also be in Florida with him.
If you bring the drinks and the cookies.
That's why I brought them.
I put off going to Florida until the next day.
I'm coming back.
Wow.
I'm coming back the next day.
Dedication. Update, I think in the email, everyone saw, yay, a new town planner coming. Very exciting, starting next week. So as soon as there's an email, I will be connecting us all. So that's really exciting, and I think obviously gonna influence what we're talking about tonight.
Did you
And-
hear anything about his background? Where is he coming from?
It is in the article.
Oh, it's in the
If
article.
anyone wants to jump in conversationally, but it is in the Cape Cod
I didn't
Chronicle
see his
article.
resume though, did you?
Does,
He's worked as a town planner in a bunch of different communities, including
No, I mean, as
Orleans,
far as-
Uh-huh.
back in the 1990s.
Way back when,
Yeah,
Do you know?
and in Norwood and Marshfield. So he's, he's had a lot of, he's a Massachusetts guy.
very experienced, both, I thought, Cape and off Cape as well.
Yeah, the
So-
description is very good.
Yes, yay for our local journalism. The Cape Cod Chronicle keeps us up to the minute all the time.
Sounded like he also had some water commission experience, which is probably gonna play pretty important.
And then you saw Mr. Powers' email, I think I forwarded that on, about the RFP. So our work tonight, we have lots of work to do around that, and that was my point of trying to project. I hopefully will be able to share my screen and we'll go through some of the light reading that I know you've been doing. The internet before here in the town hall was not working for me, so I'm connected to my hotspot, but hopefully maybe you guys will be able to get on.
I got
I
out.
think I'm
Wonderful.
The town hall is working.
Wonderful.
I
It was
almost
not.
picked up your hotspot.
Wonderful, that's great. Okay, we're chugging along. I'm gonna just bring up our spreadsheet about the core subject matter areas, and we can spend a little bit of time on that, just, not that it has to be written in stone, but I wanted to make sure, since Ed and Margot weren't able to, we had trouble with our go-to-meeting last time, make sure that you had an opportunity to kind of get on what you want to get on, and we can shuffle and make sure that that's right. All right, let me just get to the right spot.
Yeah, no matter what you do on Zoom, you can't get to go to meeting.
I use both, and I would say I've had trouble with GoToMeeting as well. I tend to be a Zoom person. In industry, I have to do some of my surgical planning on both of them, and I prefer Zoom as well, but this is what we got, so.
All I have on my computer is Zoom. I don't
Yeah,
have
no, the
GoToMeeting.
GoToMeeting is tricky. I hear you, but that's what the town has chosen as their
I
platform.
would say if I'm elected president someday, I'm gonna have a monopoly for Zoom, so we don't have to learn 6 different versions.
All right,
But I
so
don't think it's gonna happen.
here comes our SME spreadsheet, which if you're poking around our G drive, is under unique to Harwich. And let's see if I can make this a little bigger so that the projection is
The focus too, there's.
useful.
I can't read
Just a
that.
sec.
No.
It's slow. Let's see. Very slow. Obviously, I'm trying to zoom. Not zoom like communicate, like just zoom to make bigger. There we go. It's coming, but then it's going to be slow to project. Okay, that's decent. Decent. So we had talked about last time that the kind of the big program, the big organizations and sort of stakeholders in town that we would want to interface with together include the planning board, the board of selectmen, water issues broadly, as well as housing, land use, and conservation thematically. You know, understand that, of course, that these are sort of very specific entities, but those are the ideas that we're going to be kind of broadly interacting together on. And then in the idea of, I want to take a tour of Gmail, just a sec. Then the sort of specific stakeholders that we were wanting to make sure we hear from in whatever visioning process we undertake with the help of our new planner and our consultant. These were the general areas that we identified. So in retrospect, does anyone think we missed anybody?
Can
Please.
I jump in? I'm sorry I wasn't able to be here the last time. I got COVID. So,
No excuse.
And then the go-to-meeting didn't work, so.
yeah, I did try to join remotely, but anyway. I wish I could have been part of the discussion because I guess I have some concerns about this approach, and I want to just explore those a little bit.
Please.
It seems like there's a lot of overlap in people's interests. And going to individual groups, you know, sending one or two members of our group to a bunch of different organizations, I think could get very confusing and give us a lot of really random feedback. That, you know, you don't know who's going to be in their meeting, you don't know how well we will be able to translate back what we've heard to the larger group. And so, you know, looking at some of the other, I'm jumping ahead a little bit here, but looking at some of the other models from the other towns that were included in the package that you put together, both Brewster and Yarmouth, I think, came up with a visioning process that that started with outreach to a bunch of different stakeholder groups, trying to identify the values, the things that people cared about in town and wanted to preserve, and the things that they saw as being big issues that needed to be addressed. And sort of starting with probably a professional facilitator, which would be, you know, part of the consultant's role, to hold those meetings, and then, you know, you can do, once you've sort of gotten that big picture view of things, then to go back and solicit from other organizations, you know, specific feedback. It just seems, it sort of felt to me like we were getting the cart before the horse.
And I think you're right. Thank you for that, you know, input and feedback. I think maybe one of the things that was perhaps lost in translation or in the minutes only as opposed to being here, we definitely, I think, recognize that, and just with the sort of challenge of moving forward in the right direction and kind of taking advantage of this group's expertise. I don't think it was quite as granular that like we're going to go out tomorrow and talk about this, but just sort of getting ourselves organized as a committee and sort of accomplishing something and getting to know one another and what are our interests and our expertise, so sort of broadly plugging our names in these areas with the understanding that for sure this consultant and our planner are going to help us in the process. There was actually a lot of discussion about that. So I think we agree, but thank you for putting it so well.
Let me
Go ahead.
follow up a little bit on that. This idea of hiring a consultant has been central in my thinking, because I think we got to know what we're ready to hire, and I'm not sure if town administration is thinking the same way as we would be.
Which we're going to work on tonight to get our ideas together. Yes.
But piggybacking on you, Margaret, you talked about how the other community had a professional facilitator, which means hiring, which means RFP. So you're still reaching out. Now, what I don't know is, did they reach out in groups? Did they reach out all together? I know I've talked to both Provincetown and Yarmouth. They didn't hire a consultant beyond the first stage, and they had 2 surveys that they emphasized.
You said Provincetown and Yarmouth?
Yarmouth.
Gotcha.
And I think you were just talking about Yarmouth.
Yarmouth and Brewster.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which we're going to dig into those, and just to if to articulate my thought, and I know other ones, but I was kind of visioning. There were lots of ideas tossed around this, but even is, you know, ideally, okay, we have our planner and we have our consultant, and this is all trucking along. It's really nice to have, you know, Brian, Garrett, like paying attention to one particular area and making sure we're not missing. So it may get as specific as, it may get as general as that.
Can I make a comment? Because Garrett and I did spend a little time together trying to plan the community that we were, you know, signed up to work with. And one of the thoughts, I mean, I think we discussed this at the last meeting, and then Garrett and I actually put pencil to paper on approach. We thought that this was going to be a series of touch points. So I think it's actually in line with what you were just suggesting, that we do have to cast a wide net and bring in input before we create a vision, but that, well, we have to continually go back to some of these groups, or these groups need to feel like they've got a connection back to us. So
Right.
our thought is that we were kind of be a conduit over time, not just a once and done,
Right.
but that we maybe have quarterly or have
And
regular.
when this lovely consultant comes, we want to kind of be ready of like what is unique about Harwich, right? And so that's why, kind of going back to looking at this list with fresh eyes, is there any stakeholders or subject areas you think we've missed?
Yes.
Yeah. Please, that's why we're doing it. Go ahead.
I realize that you've sort of created a separate umbrella for some of these things, but there's nothing environmental in the list.
So, okay.
So it seems to me we need to think about that, and if you look at,
When you say environmental,
Environmental.
could you elaborate? Because we were
Yeah.
thinking water conservation, but please, go
yeah,
ahead.
I'm thinking
Okay.
water resources, which, includes not just public water and wastewater treatment, but the health of our estuaries, the health of our freshwater ponds, open space and recreation, which is, an important component. And Conservation Commission's part of that, but there's also the Real Estate and Open Space Committee. There are there are coastal resource issues that ought to be, part of this. And so, if you look at sort of what the topics are, either from the commission template or from some of the other towns, all these things are captured in one place or another, and people organize them in different ways. But I just want to make sure that in doing our work, those are really
Huge,
Yeah.
fundamental.
huge. And I thank you for that. And to me, open it for discussion, that seems like really important detail that I was sort of lumping generically in water land use conservation,
Yeah, but-
though I understand
But
that's not doing justice to it.
But that list of stakeholders is just that, they're voices that are impacted by these issues. I think you're right about the issues, but that is separate from the stakeholders. And one thing that we do have to work on, whether it's in the RFP or just after, is what is our set of issues that we're gonna go to these stakeholders and
Right.
get their input on. So I think what you've added is correct, but they're issues that cross the stakeholders.
Right.
But there is a very different approach whether we start with issues or we start with stakeholders. Because you folks have done a nice outline of starting with one group of stakeholders, but we still have a whole bunch of issues, so it's a little bit of chicken and egg. And I don't think we've sorted out yet the best way to start.
Can I make another, again, my background is
Yes, and then I
strategy.
want to make sure we hear from the other side of the
go
room
ahead.
as well.
Sorry,
No,
I'm monopolizing.
there was some effort to speak to.
I
No?
think you gotta get input, right? I think.
Absolutely.
But I think
Where
it's
do you
at the,
start?
but the input is at the intersection. One thing that I think we're missing is a concise set of issues that we wanna get input on. I loved, what was it, Yarmouth or one of those that you sent us, the Board of Selectmen presentation.
We're
What
gonna
the-
dig
the
into it
walk,
all
we
that.
used to call this with executives, what's the walk-around deck?
Yeah.
What's the walk-around deck, so that everybody articulates the same, now, we're not even at the vision yet. But if we can get the walk-around one page, which is, what are our big 5, 6, 7, including what you just talked about? And the first session, this is what Garrett and I were thinking, is the first session is just saying, here's some of the issues. What do you guys think? In fact, the first meeting with the stakeholders is just to engage them and let them know that they've got a conduit back to this program. Because we're gonna be back to them 3 or 4 times before we're gonna harden the vision and the strategy.
I think part of it too is like, at the end of the day, relationship building and getting input is important. But one of the best things I've seen from a planning and development standpoint, at least in the business I'm in, is information triggers action. And so you can't just come up with all these plans, and if you don't actually go in and gather that information, you're not gonna know what the next step is. We can speculate all day. So I think part of it is like, we need to take into account all those things you said. Like, I think those are key, and there might be key stakeholders within that. But I think our part of our role and responsibility is to get out to the community in the best way we can, so they feel connected to this plan. Because I forget which town it was, but they basically got shelved. A local plan got shelved. I think it was Brewster, just because of one issue.
Good.
And so I don't want us to spend 2.5 years, and it's like,
Oh, there's
we feel
always,
great.
there's always
I'm
that
sure,
risk.
I'm sure. But I think if we can try and limit the blind side,
Yeah.
right, and do our best to be the
Yeah.
voice of the group, and be as inclusive as possible. That's all I think part of it is.
And for right now, I mean, we are doing stuff. If you've got an area that you're kind of, your finger on that pulse, if you can kind of just pay attention, even though if it's not a formal interaction right now, pay attention because I think more direction is coming. Please, Bernadette.
Simply, I think I had brought this up, some of us are on this committee for breadth, not depth. When they said, we're looking for people, not necessarily who are real estate planners, engineers, et cetera, to be part of it, people who know about the culture, the history, and that's what brought me here. I'm definitely out of my areas of expertise with some of this. I think a lot of us, it's our first rodeo with something like this altogether. But that was part of this too, saying where do we think we have an interest? What brought us to this table, literally? And who would we be able to be ambassadors to for this group?
Well put.
Okay.
Well put. I'm with Bernadette.
Please, Ed.
Yeah, well, in looking at the list, a couple things that
Please.
I noticed. There's an item about surrounding towns and county, which I think has to do with how we interface what we're doing here with what's happening around us. But the other sort of out there environment we need to be aware of is the regulatory environment.
True, good point.
The regulatory environment specifically established by the state, especially right now with what DEP is planning to do to the Title V regulations.
Okay. Love it.
Which will have a substantial
Yep.
impact.
Good point.
That,
Right, and we're getting, just to be not semantics at all, because the ideas are totally related, but to Brian's point, we're getting topics versus stakeholders, but
Yeah.
that's a fluid, and I know we're mangling that a little bit, but to good end, so I'll clean this up, but yes, thank you.
and
Can I
then,
make a
No,
first?
go ahead, Ed. No, I think
then-
Ed was still
and
talking.
then,
Yep.
to Margot's point about the environmental issues, being, you have housing land use conservation, which they deal with environmental issues, but they're sort of all surrounded by how to use the environment. The one thing that occurs to me that we need to also take into account is the issue of what's happening with our climate, and see, because that'll determine whether we actually have certain environments to use anymore.
Important topics, yep.
Been watching areas of the Cape just sort of, with every storm,
Disappear.
another 50 feet of it disappears. And that's a significant problem.
Were there any stakeholders, like humans, that you think, that you could think of that we might have missed?
I know there's there's a group in town that's organized to sort of look at the whole climate change, sea level rise.
Do you have a name for them?
I do.
Yeah,
Robin Lord.
yeah.
Oh, Robin Lord, like Robin Lord. I know
Yeah.
Robin Lord well. What's the name of the group?
It's part of the Cape Cod Climate Collaborative.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a town committee on it too, right?
And then there's been a town committee that's been formed, or at least I advocated for one to be formed.
Town Climate Committee. Okay.
Yeah.
Pete, you were saying something.
I think we'll talk about it in the next sections, but
Okay.
the regulatory piece is something we should consider, and thanks for raising it, Ed, because we should consider in the consultant's capabilities that they know
Yes, file that away,
specifically
please.
what regulatory, it just related directly to what Ed just said, so I just wanted to flag it for later.
Is awesome.
Thank you.
with that, before we move away from the stakeholders, because the final section is really meaty, and I want to just kind of, that E is going to be the great majority of our meeting. Before we move away from subject matter areas and stakeholders, anybody we missed?
I have one more question, please. Go ahead.
I was just going to address the approach, just to get to see if this helps create comfort. I'm with Bernadette, although I think I'm even less experienced, with regard to town function. So I think I'm here because of strategy background. But at any rate, getting started, it's kind of a twofold attack. At least what we've always used in industry and business is interviews and working sessions. By organizing your issues, going after stakeholder groups, early on getting the input, but it's not necessarily one or the other, but it's a combination of the two. And I just wanted to
Thank you.
at least see if that made sense, because I think it is applicable here.
I think it does, and I think it's going to relate a lot to what we're going to be talking about in terms of our committee's input around what we're looking for in this
Okay.
RFP. So thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yes, Margot.
One thing that might help with this is, in the Brewster Vision Plan, one of the things they did was topic by topic, they listed stakeholders.
I saw it too.
And what you'll see in that is that there's a lot of overlap from topic to topic.
Yes. Yeah.
In who the stakeholders
good.
Because you're a young person, you're an old person,
Yeah.
you care about whether we have clean water.
But we
Yes.
might want to
Yeah.
do that kind of cross-referencing.
Yes.
Awesome, thank you.
I think that would be helpful.
Pete had a question.
It's very, and again, it's very similar. These SMEs and the people assigned to lead
Keep
them
your finger on the pulse, yes.
might end up becoming subcommittee or topic leads, might,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So that's one, and then I think there's probably gonna be a reporting up to us. This board cannot do it all at this heft.
Right.
It has to be broken up, the
Right.
work, right? Okay. I just wanna make sure I'm understanding it. Thank you.
David. And then we're going to move on
Of
to
the
E.
various things on this Google Drive, I thought the sample visioning processes,
We're going to go there next.
Okay.
Because I thought they were fun too. With that, okay, we're going to shut down Agenda D. Well, I'm sure we'll be back to this, but just making sure that everyone has felt they've had an opportunity to weigh in on this, and we can come back, of course. Barbara, thank you for taking the minutes. Garrett, since you're next to me, could I ask you, particularly just to take some additional notes, maybe in the drive?
Yep.
Because let me tell you how I was thinking about this for just a second. So obviously, we've created, I was kind of enjoying myself poking around, and it's really a credit to all of the committee here. This was not me. Everyone sent me something. So thank you for that, for all your expertise. And together, we really made something in terms of learning about this whole process and how to educate ourselves and how to think about it and kind of move our dialogue forward. So hats off to all of you for doing it. I just put it in the Google Drive. The task of this, or of E here broadly, is to put our ideas, values together for what we are looking for as a committee in this consultant. So I wanted to approach this kind of with the understanding that certainly our new town planner, who we're excited to meet, the town infrastructure and the town attorney is going to take care of a lot of the legalese. So I think we're really the idea group. And I wanted to say that we don't necessarily have to be in agreement either. There may be some healthy tension here. And if Garrett, if you could take some of those notes so that we have double coverage of it between the formal minutes and some other notes. It seemed like to me, this is my vision about going through it, I wanted to start with the Cape Cod Commission document, particularly the FAQ, because David, to your point, I found that, well, we were talking about the visioning, so I want to start with the FAQ because the LCP guidance document, I wanted to talk about that a little bit. It's a visually arresting thing that you're able to get a lot of information in. So let's go through that first. Second, on that. Our second kind of topic of this next hour and a half was to look at the visioning, both for Yarmouth and Brewster, because I thought there were some strengths and weaknesses in both that we might have some ideas about what we're interested in. And then the final kind of area of this would be, after we've looked at what the Cape Cod Commission is asking and the visioning, what we're specifically looking for and maybe what we're not looking for. So kind of going through these two sets of things, the Cape Cod Commission and the visioning stuff, to kind of as a means to discuss. Does that seem reasonable? All right. With that said, launching into the Cape Cod Commission document. I just took a few notes. I'll be very brief. Their statement of how to play, so what are we doing here? That this is the LCP, Local Comprehensive Plan, is to how to plan for growth and change. We are going to create a vision and growth policy. It's also an inventory of the existing and expected conditions. First topic of discussion, your local comprehensive plan can be certified by the Cape Cod Commission. I would advocate, and this is open to discussion, that our goal our LCP our goal is to be certified by the Cape Cod Commission. How that works, it needs to be adopted, from what I can tell, adopted by the town first, and then the commission certifies it. You have to have these 6 parts to be certified, which really sets a lot of the work up for our consultant, in terms of, you gotta nail these 6 things. And the benefits of being certified by the Cape Cod Commission is obviously legitimacy, but also being able to, in implementing that plan, being able to access some of the Commission's planning resources and funding. Would anyone disagree, and because sometimes the strength in argument is to have a counter argument as well. Anyone input pros, cons? Anyone disagree or see downsides to aiming for the goal of being certified by the commission? No. Seems like a stamp of legitimacy we want. I'm sure there's some downsides to it, but
I don't know.
I think that, the reason why there is a certification process was to try to get some consistency across Cape Towns in the way that they manage resources.
right.
And so, it's not required, but it's certainly desirable.
I think we can do this. We're a good team. We can do this. Go ahead.
There's another way to say it, which is, so long as we follow their guideposts.
Yes.
It could be certifiable, meaning we've done our part in what
Yes.
we think, as
Yes.
opposed to getting it certified.
Yes.
We wouldn't want to fail in that endeavor.
Correct. I don't see any reason looking at this that we should not be able. To that end, okay, talking about, because this is a rubric, right, that we're all learning about, and some of us have more expertise in or not. The regional policy plan goals, so this is their own LCP to think about, and I think, so if you're looking I'm on page 12, is everyone able to reasonably follow along, or do you want me to project more? Okay, I'm on page 12 of that FAQ document. So they talk about the regional policy plan goals that are really high-level concepts. And so you see natural systems here, you see built systems. To that end, I love how highly designed this is. That you get a lot of information because it's visually sophisticated. It's designed, that there's a lot of clear information that's being communicated both by pictures and minimal words.
No.
Yes, go ahead.
Are these just examples, or?
No, these are their RPPs.
These are the 6,
These are them. I don't want to get too granular, but if you go through the document, there are higher up, there are the specific points that you have to include, so I don't want to mangle that. But then these are the RPP areas, topics. And I just wanted to go through this with everyone to think about natural systems, built systems, which includes the soap, energy, waste, climate, community systems, cultural heritage, economy, housing. Is there anything, and then specifically going on to place types, this was interesting to me when they talk about different areas. So that's on page 14. Natural areas, rural development areas. This all is obviously very smart and high level. What I wanted to spend some time talking about is how this maybe applies to Harwich. When people think of our town, is there some nuance to this that we want to add?
I think that their place types are fine for us.
Okay.
I think this is not something where we need to reinvent. I think it's simply a matter of deciding what we have that might be unique and how it fits into these
Okay.
categories.
Could you, when you look at that, when you look at the place type thing in 14, really just for me to think about this, and everyone can jump in. I mean, natural areas, okay, we think of the beach or Bell's Neck. When you think of rural development areas, suburban development areas, can you put like a Harwich spin on that? I'm not holding you to it, I'm just trying to,
I think our suburban development areas are most of our neighborhoods away from the beach. And I think there's a lot of neighborhoods throughout this town with moderate level housing that hasn't gone the way of the beach stuff in terms of $1 million movement. So I think that we have some pretty modest neighborhoods. I think we have some more expensive neighborhoods that have developed more recently in East Harwich. And all of those, I think, are suburban.
Okay.
of
What
neighborhoods.
does anyone think of as a rural development area?
Yeah, we don't have a lot of that.
We don't.
Maybe a little bit around North Harwich.
And they describe, they describe it as, is where rural for development areas to ensure the development is located, site, and scaled appropriately to avoid impacts on scenic and/or cultural resources, and to maintain the economic diversity. 6 ponds, okay,
Okay.
okay. Just trying to make this our own, as we work within this.
But we might have a lot less rural development area than suburban development area, but I would still argue that these place types are right on target.
Okay, yeah.
And there is a map that the commission has that they gave sort of their big picture view of where they think these place types are. And it might be an interesting exercise for us at some point to
Might want
look
to
at
change
that
that one, right?
for Harwich.
Maybe we can ask if we could take notes in all the memos.
Active map.
Yeah,
We should-
You can get a hard copy of it too.
Oh,
but
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That would be a great thing to maybe talk with
For
Chloe
forensic
about too. Okay.
Go find stuff.
Oh, look,
Please,
I
Ed.
wonder if we have
Oh,
any
Jim,
less-
and then Ed. Yeah.
Do we have any less rural areas than other towns on the Cape, or is it Cape Cod?
Well, yeah, Harwich is the only town on the Cape that is not classified as a rural community.
Really?
Why
know
are we
that.
not classified as a rural
Because
community?
our population density, given our size, is too high.
Wow,
And is that a federal designation?
even Barnstable is not
No.
more dense than we are?
They're so much larger.
I see.
That's crazy. I didn't know that one.
That's a federal designation.
That based
Interesting.
on full-time residents or just population
It's
period?
just population,
Census tract probably.
you know,
That's awesome, Ed. Thank you.
you know,
Building
it comes
moratorium.
up.
Yeah,
Comes
for
up in
federal.
applying for CDC.
Yes.
CDC block grants, et cetera. We stand out, and that's why we always have to sort of join up with other towns.
Thank you for
Oh,
that.
bureaucracy.
So looking at, again, we're from,
Early years in the Office of Economic Opportunity.
no, that's so important. Thank you for that. Looking at the LCP template, so this is where I was, Jim, to your question about what are the components that are needed. This is on page 19. So the LCP template that we are going to be plugging into, right, is to get approval, we're going to have a vision statement and growth policy. We're going to have community goals. We're going to have an inventory of existing conditions. We're going to have key issues and needs. We're going to, I guess, the build-out analysis is optional. There's various ways to meet these goals or meet these components that need to be included. Capital infrastructure and facilities. So that's when you read that, when you dig into this, we are going to have a financial justification, so to speak, of how to implement our vision, our goals, which is going to be, we'll get into talking about looking for the consultant to help us interface with the other committees and plans in town, the housing plan. And then they are encouraged to include harbor, watershed, housing, open space, and recreation. There's got to be a public process, which we're down with, and including the Cape Cod Commission and then the action plan that we can fund. They talk about, and I think we noted in some of the other RFPs that they were specifically asking for expertise from the consultant about recommendations about how zoning or bylaws might need to be changed to implement your goals, your plans, and a performance measure. I mean, that's a thing, right? You gotta, to know you're doing it, you have to be able to measure it, right? So those are the components. I wanted to open it up for discussion for a few minutes.
Could I
Please.
just ask one question, David? When you were talking about the place types, and you were talking about suburban, and you said something about when you get away from the beach, were you indicating that the residential areas right adjacent to the beach weren't suburban?
No, it's just, to me, there's such a difference in this community between the two areas. I guess they're both suburban.
Yeah, okay.
Just some,
Just upscale versus.
Yeah.
Density, assessment. I
was-
took it as
Yeah.
density, also
It-
assessment per square foot, or,
yeah, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have put it that way. It's not an important distinction.
maybe.
I think my main point was, I think the place types are fine.
Yeah.
I think we
Yeah.
can work with what they've done. Again, in trying to fit with the overall Cape Cod Commission template, which I think is a good idea, that's one of the ones we can work with.
I was kind of just stuck on it, not that I'm criticizing it, but how do we make it work for us? And I actually,
Well, that's the test.
I actually think your point of that a neighborhood inland and a neighborhood on the beach, say in Harwich Port or wherever, there are different demographics and different even environmental pressures and yeah.
Well, my definition of suburban always meant residentially based, but with a sprinkling of mixed use, right? So that's how when I hear suburban, that's, I think, the definition of suburban is that it's residentially based, but there's a sprinkling of
Yeah.
of commercial use. Now, if we look at certain areas of Harwich Port, right, obviously there's that exact definition. When we move more toward the school, the elementary school, that becomes less commercial.
That's what I wondered, is it rural, like,
Right,
but
I
just
don't
kind
think
of
we need to get
organizing
into
our
the
brains a
semantics
little
here,
bit, yeah.
but
Yeah,
when I
Yeah.
hear suburban, there has to be a commercial component to that. And I'm not, that's in my mind, I'm not saying that's the right thing or the wrong thing.
It's so hard to decide what framework you're gonna use to tackle the whole town's issues.
Yeah, we're gonna use this one.
Well, but I'm gonna say just the opposite,
Okay, no,
which is that these place types are fine.
Yeah.
But they don't really get at
right,
the things in our community.
exactly.
So, but we can get at the issues in some other way.
Okay.
And then we're gonna find out how we can match them to the place types, and we can probably even have a consultant do that, and we don't have to spend much time on it.
Okay.
We do have to spend our time on figuring out the most
Okay,
important issues.
we're trucking along then. I just want to make sure everyone feels heard around this, or any questions, or we don't even have to have an answer, but anything you're noodling on around this, because I think this is going to be our core framework. No matter who we hire, we're going to be coming back to this.
I might be jumping ahead, but the Truro RFP is very, very close to this template.
Yes.
And so that, and I mean, it's not a perfect fit for us, but in terms of just sort of laying out a scope of work, it's as close to sort of following this organizational structure as any of the ones that we looked at, so.
I don't want to monopolize, but I can't help keep jumping in. My question about Truro is, when I looked at Yarmouth and Provincetown, I was impressed by the fact that they didn't take on the whole thing all at once.
Right.
Could we get to that? Keep going. No, go ahead.
They really focused on the first piece of it.
Yep.
Now, did Truro try to hire a consultant for all of it, all at once? Because that's what I'm sort of worried about.
The RFP included the full, everything,
Yeah,
but they did do a visioning, they funded a visioning process first. And so they did that for, that piece first.
maybe,
And that's pretty much what Brewster and Yarmouth did too.
okay.
And I
That
think
might
that's
work.
something we need to talk about, is do we want to approach it that way?
Can we jump in? I think as long as, before I move away from the Cape Cod Commission, any other questions, thoughts, and then we'll get into the visioning and,
I just
yes.
have a question, and
Yeah.
maybe Margot or David knows the answer to this. So obviously, we have the Cape Cod Commission, and it seems like everybody on the Cape is on board with using this as a template. Are there alternatives that other towns outside of the Cape use? Like, are there other commissions just like the Cape Cod Commission that help guide towns through this? And are we missing anything from those? I'm just not aware.
In my belief, there is so much room to establish your unique identity within the Cape Cod guidelines that there's no reason to look for other guidelines.
Cool. That's all I was
No, the
curious
strength
about.
and argument is counter argument.
I was just trying to
so
steel
right
man
on.
the
Yes.
situation, but
And may I add to that?
sure.
I like the structure of it. I mean, this is what I've been looking for since we very first met, when I kept saying, I don't know what the scope and the approach.
We're making progress.
This was
Getting
wonderful. But I don't know that we have to, we can evolve the place types that are part of our vision. If we start with these, we might find as we work with them that some
Yeah.
need to be morphed and some get crossed out. So I guess my comment was, I think it's fine to start with the structure and let the process work through what gets modified, amended, crossed, and whatnot. And then the other thought I had about the consultant is I think it sounds wonderful to focus on the deliverables, to say whether or not we have an RFP for the whole end-to-end process or not. Maybe that makes sense, but the focus is on the near-term deliverables, so that if this consultant doesn't work out too well, you can abandon them at the vision point and pick up somebody else to work through the next deliverable. But let the process be deliverable focused, and then test those deliverables with the Cape Cod Commission so that we're not going off the rails and sideways. But what I really liked about this is, familiar to consulting terms and my consulting background, that it's got a very nice structured flow to it.
Sure.
That I think we want to hang on to that structure.
Any other topics of discussion, questions about the Cape Cod Commission format? Okay. To transition a bit to the visioning, and I think this is going to be the helter-skelter of the meeting, which is fine, we're doing great, we're covering a lot of ground, is I wanted to look at the Yarmouth and Brewster visioning, just a way to kind of jump into this. And knowing that we're gonna take a lot of notes here, and I'm okay with if everyone's just kind of tossing a lot of stuff out here to begin with, and then maybe we'll take a little break and we can double back and be a little more organized, is looking at these other examples, what do we value, both in terms of what we're asking of them, the deliverables, process. I think we're all going to be tossing it into the stew here, and then maybe we'll come back and organize. This stuck out to me, this made me laugh. In one of the RFPs, they used the word charrettes. Did anyone know that word? I did not know that word. I learned a new word, charrettes, and I wrote it down. A meeting of stakeholders to resolve conflict and map solutions. And someone asked specifically in their RFP that the consultant would hold charrettes. I thought that was great.
They really are invaluable.
Oh, yeah, I just
If
know the
they're
word.
done well.
I'm just adding, like, what a
If
good
they're run
word.
correctly, they cut right to the core what needs to be done.
So I just thought it was a great example of a very specific request in the RFP. So to kind of jump in a little bit, and then, we'll throw a lot out here and then we'll take a break at some point, 5-minute break. Yarmouth, really interesting to me. The community visioning process, and, you know, to pick up a point that Garrett had made a meeting or two ago about the transparency of how this is done, like how this stuff evolves. Pretty darn simple. It's just all on their website, yarmouth.mass.us, you know, forward community visioning, and they have it actually organized by date, so you can click through here with literally every document that they have created, and tossed this out here. I also loved that they had the vision statement, which again, a draft of the vision statement, which is highly designed. So a lot of information is communicated visually with minimal words. I mean, a lot of effort goes in that to make it look so good. That was the draft. And then, I may have the wrong thing up, but where is it? Draft of the vision plan. And they went back and they opened it up per this documentation to like, hey, this is just a draft. What have we missed? What is wrong here? And opened it up to public comment to like add more. And this is the document I was talking about. I think the amount of information conveyed with words, you know, so community, they broke it down, and we don't have to, you know, get this specific about it, but for example, community character and design, you know, goals to reach this vision, preserve, provide, and then they've got photos, right? These are some important things that are in Yarmouth. So a lot of information is conveyed by those pictures. Housing, they, you know, preserve, this was interesting, existing year-round housing stock, promote increase in year-round use of existing housing stock, provide, and then they're talking about some of the building stuff, and then adding some pictures. You know, this is a big project that they accomplished in Yarmouth. Neither here nor there, but they're really showing with photos, very specific to the town. I would, as we start to throw out everything we want from this consultant, the transparency and the opportunity to revise is something I would throw on our list that to me feels important. And I want to open it up to discussion, and everyone can toss in their opinions, and then we'll maybe organize a little bit after we take our break of process, content. I think it's all fair game here.
So I'm going to throw in my conversation with the Yarmouth planner. They had a much smaller amount of money, $20,000.
This is amazing.
And they used it to hire a consultant. They had a call list, so they didn't have to go very far to find a consultant. And they ended up doing 2 surveys.
Mm-hmm.
This is all in the visioning process.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't try to do anything more, which is why I brought up that question earlier. They started with an open-ended survey.
Which they have on here.
Which they didn't say, what do you think of
No,
climate
they-
change,
they
what
ha-
do you
they
think of cultural, whatever.
Yeah.
And they had a heck of a time processing that because
It's all
it wasn't
written.
yes, no.
And
Right.
to that point, again, just for conversation's sake, because this is a messy meeting, but we like it, is biased to someone who reads and writes English, you know, or is also motivated enough to say, I can pull it up here, is motivated enough to fill out these blank pieces of paper. But maybe that's good, maybe it isn't. Yep.
So then they had, after the first survey, they had an aggressive public engagement plan. Perhaps the sort of thing that we're starting on with some of our stakeholder groups.
Here are the data summary sheets. If you hadn't poked around this, they're intimidating in that they're opened. Go ahead.
The second survey was much more directed, so it was a lot easier to process. But they didn't want to direct the process too much. They were stuck with the open-ended one to begin with. So that's just a few of the things we have to decide which way do we want to go on these things.
Or do the open-ended stakeholder meetings ahead of doing a very specific survey. Either way, you're trying to get the big rocks.
These are these workshop worksheets. Here they come. Slowly.
I think Dave, with the survey stuff too.
Here they are,
Just the
yeah.
art of the survey itself, right? It's like you start with that broad scope, like you were saying, it's gonna be hard to congeal that down into subject matters that are like, hey, these are important to the town. But I think natural human instinct is to kind of ride the rails and not make a decision. So we were just talking when we were talking about how do we get people to prioritize their issues. And one of the techniques in surveys, at least in what we do when we intake stuff from customers, is you basically list all the things they want and you make them go 1 through 10,
Rank 'em.
and you make every single person do it who's involved. So once we get and distill down to, I think those
Data,
points, we can do that.
data analysis, this struck me as really hard, but I mean, bless them doing that, because it's an amazing product, at least from me reading it.
Where is it?
So this is, these are the Document Center workshop worksheets. So they ask, what are your strengths and assets? What do you value most? And they have all these ideas. But again, you got to be able to write this all. This is qualitative data, right? This is not quantitative data. This is descriptive and social science, qualitative data.
It's unstructured.
Yes, which is, unless we're doing it, very expensive to code and, and analyze, right? What are Yarmouth's challenges today and in the future? And then they kind of give some guideposts, right? And affecting the most number of people. This is a very high level, you gotta be really motivated to fill this out.
But yeah, I guess I don't see that being filled out by, you're not gonna get many responses.
It's a lot
on
of
that.
bias. They tell you how many. They had like 400 and something.
Yeah,
And
but
then they
they-
had 900
got
something on the
900
second.
after they made it
Yeah,
more.
but what, I mean,
It's
yeah,
easier.
that's small for a town. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
right.
What was the survey that you saw?
So,
Which one?
There was a detailed survey that Garrett
Oh,
found.
it was Barnstable's. It was on patch.com. I think you sent out the link.
Yeah, I think it's
they had
in there
a,
somewhere.
that was-
It's
that was a good
under, it's under, visioning process, Barnstable.
Yeah, Barnstable's, I thought Barnstable's survey was so generic as to be meaningless. I mean, there was nothing specific about the town. It could have been written for Pittsburgh.
probably was.
so maybe for the first step, you don't do the Yarmouth undirected survey that only gets 400 responses.
Right.
Maybe you do the stakeholder process
Do
and
you,
ask the open-ended questions.
To the groups.
so do we want to hear from, just putting in something we want to ask for, would we like from this consultant, maybe, a choice of options for data gathering so that we could choose, right? Or not a single vision of like, so maybe this consultant is gonna come and say, here's the pros of doing this survey. Here's the pros of doing qualitative data. This is how much of your, this is what, the pros and cons. This is how I advise you to go forward, and we either agree or disagree.
Yeah, we should
So
be
I-
clear that they're gonna give us a recommendation.
Options
But
for,
also a recommendation for knowing
Correct.
the size of our town.
Correct.
Or the structure.
go ahead, Jeff.
I just think there needs to be some digging done to find out what's gonna produce the most responses.
So we're asking for their expertise in
And
that.
we want, to narrow it down here, we want their expertise and their experience to tell us what is gonna get us the widest net
So we want some
of our residents.
expertise in most appropriate
and most appropriate.
Data gathering.
Data gathering.
in the visioning process. Is that-
So, yeah, I mean,
And one more little step to that is not only what the format should be, but what the content should be to drive the most people to respond versus having to write it in versus checking boxes. This kind of stuff, I think, is,
But it's, I'm sorry, but it's not one or the other. It could still be
it
both.
doesn't have to be.
And
That's
that-
what we're
so-
asking for.
Right, so it's
Right.
not, I think we eventually have to get to the quantitative, right?
Right,
Because
right.
that's where you get the heat map, where we got that Yarmouth that was saying that these constituent groups were
Yes.
connected to that. I mean, that's a wonderful heat map by people saying high, medium, low on their, so we know we gotta get to quantitative. We know we gotta get some buy-in to the town.
Right.
What's the best approach? to
Right,
get
so
to
we're
that?
asking for, that's
Correct.
a value we are looking for this consultant, is some depth and breadth of an experience of how to,
yeah, I mean, I think it's a component of the scope of work, and it probably should be upfront first thing to
Yep.
say, what do you propose as a public engagement process?
Exactly.
It could involve, community workshops, it could involve surveys, it could involve, a variety of things. I mean, in Brewster, what they did was they had a set of workshops to ask people, what do you value about town and what are you concerned about?
Right.
Then they went and they developed some draft goals under all those topics and went back and had a second set of workshops.
I think it's reflective of the conversation we've had at the meetings before, at our meetings before, is that we have the sense of that there is some reporting bias if you have a meeting at Wednesday night at 6 p.m. So there's a lot of reporting bias, because that's a huge privilege to be able to, come to that kind of meeting and not necessarily capturing. So we have spoken in earlier meetings of wanting to have sort of multimodal way of interfacing with the community. And so it was out of somebody's RFP talking about a broad visioning process that included social media work, website work, and limited response bias.
Yeah.
So that does anyone want to add to that?
In these RFPs, Margot or anybody else who's done them for towns, do we ever have like metrics around, hey, we expect this consultant to get XYZ engagement from the town population? Like, is that normal to build that stuff in?
You mean, you're talking about the
Yeah,
actual
let's just say it's a
numbers
like a
of-
Let's say, hey,
response rate.
the average people intake this for LCPs.
I've never
is-
seen that.
Okay.
I've never seen that.
I think one of the things, the approach should dictate, if we feel comfortable, and there'll be pros and cons of every approach, but if we feel comfortable that kind of gets the town, but we're looking around at our room and we're pretty hetero, sort of racial, and we're, and we're not
Certain
all
ages and white.
family, young children, some of us are, but that's gonna be a concern.
Oh, it's huge.
It's
Like,
they need to know that it's 2022. I think
so
they'll
and this
expect
is like a really important issue to put in. That's why we're talking about it. I think we're all on the same page as broad and interdisciplinary way to vision process in the town. We're looking for some, actually Pete's point, 2022 ways of gathering this data.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, I just don't think that we should tie their hands. I mean, when
Right.
we send out this RFP, they need to tell us how they're gonna do that, why they're gonna do it, and we have to make that decision as to whether or not, how we feel about which way to go, because you really don't wanna direct them on how to respond to us. I mean,
No.
you're losing, we'll lose
Right, but
everything if we do that.
we're articulating, hey, this is important, so that a group that's looking, hey, are we a good fit for this job or not? Oh, well, if we just kind of do community meetings at 6 o'clock on a Tuesday, well, then they're not going to be a good fit for us, right? So we're articulating this value. Please, Ed.
Yeah, it's not only, what they're proposing is a good fit for what we see the job to be, but it's also whether the organization is a good fit for our community. Which is something you can only really evaluate through having a presentation made by each of the groups. And having gone through this over 36 years, the engagement you get all depends on how engaging what you're talking about is to the population. And in a lot of cases, a lot of the neighborhoods around aren't really gonna get engaged in this process until the very end, when you're talking about putting a
Boardwalk
Boardwalk
out to
in.
to Wing Island.
increasing the density of their neighborhood.
To
And-
that,
And they'll.
to that end, Ed, I asked this question provocatively in the means of discussion here. Is there, to everyone, including Ed, do we have the value, I don't know, right or wrong, of we are interested in a consultant who has a working knowledge of Cape Cod?
Yeah, I mean, I think
Absolutely.
when you're looking at the evaluation criteria, that's,
So
No.
let's put it in.
yeah.
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 But, it's, I've been involved in so many processes that have gone on for years with hundreds of meetings at town councils
Yeah.
and public hearings and actually several votes at election time, only to come to when you're actually going to form the public parking district and put in parking meters, that all of
Yes.
a sudden half the town says, when did this happen? You
Right,
know?
right.
And this isn't a town that's a mile square.
Right.
And with 17,000 people, it's not like, you know.
So other ideas that I wanted to throw out there to get the discussion going that seemed like, to me, that are things we are looking for in this consultant. I would be interested and open to discussion of that this consultant brings the ability to integrate, because it's a requirement of the commission, land use capital planning plans, so that they need to help us interface with those plans. There's a more articulate way of saying that, but.
Yeah.
The other, obvious, we've agreed on that our goal is to get approval of the Cape Cod Commission, so that's, be familiar with that plan, with that process. The last, and I want to open it up totally to discussion, is I would be interested in hearing from the consultant, the ability, or if they could facilitate, the ability for us to evaluate broadly various strategies to address our housing issues. You and I talked about that, Ed. You were
Yeah.
tossing out like that there's a lot of
Yeah.
things going on nationally about how different communities with similar pressures are potentially addressing that. So the consultant's ability to bring some of those, not that we need to adopt them, but for a form, like bring that form for discussion, would be a useful thing to pay for.
Is there a priority order of those things? We have to
I'm
be
just
careful.
tossing, so could we just toss them
It is.
all
Oh, sure,
out there?
sure. Oh, sure.
Yeah, and then we'll
Okay.
come back and organize, and that's my wish list.
Okay.
Everybody else's wish list, please, anything, nothing is wrong, nothing is, let's toss it all in there.
Well, it occurs to me that, we all see, I think we could all agree on probably a dozen major issues that face Cape Cod and our community specifically. And it occurs maybe we do the approach to the visioning process in taking those issues to the stakeholder groups.
So, yes, a way, so that this consultant, ideally, if we had a magic wand, I mean, we're like creating this magical mythical person, but yes, or ability, that they would have the ability or the expertise to get the stakeholders group's opinions on these major,
We have,
the RPP goals.
we have, housing, and we have wastewater, and we have providing an economy that people
Can participate in, yeah.
be sustainable on Cape Cod, and we have climate issues, and trying to come up with a plan that addresses those issues and in a way that will be desirable and acceptable.
David, you might be able to clarify this a little bit, but one of the things I noticed in the newspaper recently is that the town's open space plan is out of date. And that's actually really important, because if we don't have an active approved plan, we can't access certain kinds of state funding.
And we can't interface with them, oh, right,
yeah.
yep.
So I'm wondering if we couldn't just roll that into our process here. There's a very good plan, which we've all looked at, that really just needs updating. It doesn't seem like it would be a huge amount of work to do that, but I don't know, I mean,
Yeah, I was thinking about that. In the newspaper, they said the board of selectmen was trying to decide if the funding for the LCP that we're all
We're
doing.
gonna take it from us to give
Yes,
to
they're
them.
gonna take it from them. Well, you certainly can, because an open space plan is a direct component.
right,
But then, well, you just said, we already have a very good plan
Yeah.
that just needs updating.
yeah.
the updating, I mean, I know that plan,
Yeah.
the one that we have now. And there needs to be a new survey. Survey is another thing we gotta do, folks. So whether it's a separate survey or part of the same one, basically, you just simply need to check in with Amy Huzowski, our conservation administrator, and with the Conservation Commission, and maybe Real Estate and Open Space or a couple of the others. Do you folks know this plan? Is there anything that needs to be different? It should be a very easy process to
That's what
update
I
that
think
plan.
too.
I don't
It
wanna
should-
waste
It's
a
a
lot of
great
consultant
idea,
dollars
Yeah.
on something that should be very easy.
Yeah.
I love efficiency.
Other magic wands, I mean, knowing that we don't think we're gonna, maybe we're gonna find somebody who embodies all of this, but this is the time to think
Well, the other-
big asks.
the
That's a
other-
great one, that's
The other
amazing.
big plan is the housing production plan. And I'm not gonna give the same, response, which is that I think I don't think things have changed that much in 5 years for the open space plan. For the housing plan, we have basically failed.
Well, this is,
And
yeah,
so we gotta do a much better job. The housing production plan gives all the answers in all the ways, but it doesn't really get it done.
well, this is
So we need something better on that one.
my point that I would love with, this person to have expertise in,
Housing strategy.
housing strategy or bringing various approaches to housing strategy to us to adopt or to think about or to discuss or, and then hanging some metrics to this, that this is doable through the Cape Cod Commission's. I mean, that's the point of being approved, right, is that this is how it gets done.
Do we face, though, there's a lot of people in town who are spending a lot of time on housing. Are they gonna say, who are these people, all of a sudden saying,
I think it's
This
out
is
of our
how to do it.
purview, actually.
Really?
I do, and after speaking with Joe Powers, he had mentioned that those two specific committees have not updated their plans, so it's gonna be very difficult for us to interface, as you put it, with those two committees. And I'm not sure our consultant can come in and work with us to create
They can't fix it.
what those committees should be
Agree.
creating.
Well,
That's my only concern.
our consultant in this committee can maybe put the spark under those committees to move.
No
it.
question.
Yeah.
And I see what you're saying, Jeff, totally, of the mechanics of how do you fix housing in Harwich, but how can we, I would just, philosophically say it back, how can we label something, a long-term plan in Harwich without considering housing?
But
In-
I agree
In
100.
developing
Yeah.
our long-term plan, we need to make use of what's going on in this town already. In our
Right, sure.
outreach, we need to talk to what's the latest housing group called?
Housing trust.
The Housing Trust.
Right.
We gotta meet with them and find
Yeah.
out what's going
Yeah.
on,
Right.
find out
Yeah.
what they're doing before we know what else
So
we need.
this is the value of the consultant, right? Like that maybe that's the consultant.
Oh, I don't wanna hire a consultant to go talk to the Housing Trust.
No, 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 no.
well, they're right.
That was my point.
No, yeah. I
Is
guess,
I-
I guess.
I think the conversation with those two committees should be had sooner rather than later.
So they're helping us, is it saying that,
And then our consultant could then maybe begin to work with them as they're preparing to finish up the amendments to their documents that are existing.
or do they provide the discussion has been like, how do we go out and represent ourselves well and collect information accurately, right? So do they help us do that? To your point of like, we're not hiring the consultant to go talk to the housing trust, but how, do they help us?
In my own mind, I know how we could use a consultant for a visioning process. I know how we could use an outreach process to at least go out to some of our key stakeholders that already exist, such as the Housing Trust.
Okay,
I can see us proceeding along both of those lines.
okay.
I still personally back off hiring a consultant for the whole thing, exactly because I don't know what direction we can give on one of the most important issues, which is housing.
Yeah, Barbara had something to say.
I'm just trying, if all of these other committees and contents are supposed to be feeding up to us so that we put everything together, I mean, are we just pushing a rope with a couple of these committees or some of these committees? I mean, it's not our job to come up with a housing plan, is it? I mean, we're supposed to be taking data that's there and incorporating it and then looking forward.
To go back to
I mean-
not that I have the answer for that question, and
How are we
I
gonna fix
appreciate
it
what
if
you're
somebody
saying
can't be
philosophically.
fixed?
The Cape Cod Commission, the guidance does say we're supposed to have some plan on housing. We don't have.
No,
we
no,
supposed
no,
to
I'm with
create
you,
it?
but is it this committee's job to write the housing
Invent
plan?
everybody else's, yeah.
I guess what I'm saying is that there's not enough hours in the
Right.
day.
Yeah, right,
So if,
right,
if, you know,
right.
we're gonna take the open space plan, hopefully they'll update it, and they're gonna feed it to us so that we're gonna incorporate all this. The housing, am I wrong, David? The housing,
No, I think I'm gonna backtrack, but to follow up on this, I think we go to the housing trust, find out what they're doing and what they need. We get the answers from them and we got another housing committee in town, which probably isn't doing too much right now. We got the real estate and open space committee, they're not, take them back, that's not for housing. But if we get a better handle on what these existing groups are doing and make sure we know from Joe Powers what administration is thinking, then I
So
think
we
we
need,
can see
so,
what more needs to
and
be
they
done.
need some help. The consultant can help us with
right.
that. So even if they're
The new housing act.
their interface, what we're asking of a skill is to interface with various town committees. Yes.
This kind of bounces back to what I was talking about earlier. It seems like there would be real value in having some members of our committee go and meet with these various groups
Yes.
to basically say, look, we're getting started
Yes.
on an update of the local comprehensive plan. This is what a local comprehensive plan is, and it includes the following elements.
Yes.
And one of those elements is in your
Purview.
bailiwick.
Yep.
And so we're going to be seeking your input on this. We want to understand where you are in your planning process if you have a specific plan. And we're going to be having some public, outreach, whether it's through a survey or meetings, charrettes.
Love that word.
Any of those things. And to solicit their participation in that. So that, I think, would be very useful to do, and we could start that any old time,
We've had to sort of get ourselves a bit organized to
Yeah.
to even understand what we're doing, but I think we're
Yeah,
getting
and
there.
I think
Yes.
we want to make sure that we're all carrying the same message
Correct.
to these other groups, that we're not getting people confused about what it is we're doing here.
Ed and then Jim.
Yeah, well, with housing, part of what we're doing is, it's a comprehensive plan. We're comprehensively looking at the town and its needs. And we will come up with certain conclusion about, in the area of housing, what the needs are. We go
Or
to the
what we
housing-
anticipate the needs to
Yeah,
be, to
yeah.
this guideline that
Yeah.
the Cape Cod Commission.
If we go to the housing trust, and they're all hot on going in a direction that solves part of a housing problem, but not really the critical housing problem, then we have a case where we have a town department or organization going off and not implementing what is going to become, so, there needs to be some interplay back and forth,
There needs to be,
And-
buy-in from
Yeah.
all of those
And-
groups,
and,
because
quite
otherwise the
honestly,
plan.
and this may be my opinion, but you also need, on some of these boards, housing trust specifically, is a group of people that actually can close a deal and come to conclusion, because they don't seem to be able to come to a conclusion on what it is they want to do with the properties that they have.
Jim.
Well,
Yeah,
there were
I
like,
hear you. Yeah.
there were like 5 of us at the meeting
Yeah.
two times ago. I didn't go to the last one, but, and frankly, it sounded like a lot of the folks at this table had a little bit more of an idea of what to do than what was being presented. But anyway, except for Joe, he knows everything about this, in a weird way. But I was gonna ask the question, so what if we go to them and they tell us what they're up to, and we think that's not a good idea? Is that our role to sort of like intervene in a sense with words if we don't agree? Or
To our non-binding agreement,
Exactly.
yes.
Or do we go out and get the best guidance from the people of the trust and then bring it in? I'm struggling with that.
Great question.
We start to see what they're doing then we may have, yes, we're trying to set out a vision for the town, so we can do just about anything, but we have to be careful about what we choose to take on. But we won't know where we stand until we check with the people who are working on it right
Yeah.
now.
That's right.
It seems to me we need to do all of what we're saying, is to build, well, to build the early relationships, right? To see what they have.
Yeah.
If they've got a plan, great, we pull it in, but the way to test the plan is to test it against the vision that we're building. And we're not gonna finish building the vision until we have constituent stakeholder meetings, surveys. So maybe what we need with this planner is to lay out a plan for how do we get to the, not planner, the consultant, is so that we all share the same view for what's our roadmap, what's our plan and approach and meetings and constituents and timeline to get to the vision. Because it's going to include a number of the things that we've talked about. And just the last thought about whether or not we can assess whether something is in our purview not aligned, it's whether or not the plan that we're collecting aligns to the vision.
So,
And identify
what we're
gaps.
asking of, just to say that, because I think the goal of this meeting is to be able to go back to Joe and Megan and our new planner and say, these are the things that we as a committee value and our priorities in this RFP for, because they're obviously gonna take care of the other sort of legal and financial chunks of it. And I think what I'm hearing is the ability to help the committee deliberate on, contrarian information or opposing information in the town, right?
Is that like, would you guys, because I feel like some of this stuff would be the skill that you would probably put in
Yes,
there is like
yeah.
project management,
Right?
some
Right?
level of project management skill set.
Pete was gonna say something.
So it goes back to what we discussed last time, and I think we batted around, but we didn't come to a final conclusion. When do we expect this consultant to start? And
I am 100% transparent with you guys. Everything I know, I try to send along to you. It was a little herky-jerky, but it's all good. We're doing important stuff here. We're doing good work. So I don't know.
Well, the reason I ask is not to totally change the subject at all, actually, but to build upon what I think we were just talking about, which is we have months of meetings. If they're not on board until March, we have January, February, and March meetings to conduct business that we have no idea what we want to do.
So I'm hoping with our new planner next week, we'll have a little bit of a better sense about that. And we have proven ourselves, I think, that we're able to accomplish some things with
So then, for
minimal
instance-
guidance. And the short answer is I don't know.
So
I'm
for
with you.
instance, as in your, can I maybe ask differently?
Yeah.
So in your role as chair, or maybe with Jeff, you guys can meet with, I think, without running afoul of public meeting laws, with staff to lay out, that planners work with us also in
Yes.
those intervening months, because that planner's also gonna have to have, they staff the planning board. Right? So that's gonna be a busy time. All right, so that's sort of question number one. And then going back to Joe's note to you, which I thought made a little bit of sense, but maybe I would ask it differently next week or tomorrow, which is why don't they send us what their proposed format would be? And because then we know it's blessed by legal. And then we could edit for content and more ephemeral or I don't know.
Our values.
Planner,
Our values, right,
And then
what
they can
we're-
re-edit it, because we're
Yes.
not trying to, if we send them something and it's sent back all redlined or not taken, I'm not gonna feel as comfortable, I wish because
No,
it's another
point-
good thing for us
point well
to do
taken.
over the
Yeah,
next 2 months.
Yeah. And I think the short answer is we don't know, but
But that's just
Onwards
an
we go.
approach. Yeah, well, that's
Yeah.
an approach to
great
streamline
point.
our work over the next 6 weeks.
it's a great point.
Sorry.
No, I was just saying,
That's all I have.
if I would propose, just for, in the last, next 4 or 5 minutes, everyone wants to kind of throw in anything that they think we've missed in terms of what we should be looking for in this soul. Maybe take a 5-minute break and come back and try to consolidate our points. Is that okay? Is there consensus of that?
You want me to
All
start?
ideas are welcome. Jim?
So we're doing ideas now.
Ideas, we love ideas.
One thing we haven't talked about is, how are we going to interact with the new planning person too? Is that, like, what is their role, what is our role, and are they gonna
I
do
think
what
they're
for us?
supposed to help us a lot.
So they're supposed to help us, but, you know, what do you
I
think?
don't think we know yet.
Right,
The
that we-
guy does have local plan experience in development.
Mhm.
Now, I may have said this at a previous meeting. The last guy, John Eidman, he was focusing much more on zoning documents and zoning regulations than on the LCP. So he wouldn't have cared as much. The new guy may wanna, if I'm the new guy coming into a job, and there's a new committee getting started, and I care about.
We're gonna try and present ourselves well.
well,
My
I think the
goal is
point
he
is-
is gonna be a big collaborator.
If we're gonna want much of his time, he's gonna wanna be involved in making the
I hope
decisions
so.
we're talking about
That's
right
what I'm
now. So,
wondering.
you know, I think we should get his input before going too far.
Absolutely, and that's why we're doing this, we're doing stuff.
And he'll be at the January meeting?
I hope so.
Well, we certainly should.
We don't have his email address yet. As soon as I do,
We
I
will
will.
soon.
Yes, yes. Other ideas from this consultant, values, thoughts, things you want.
I'm sorry, I'm always going in a different direction. I'm still uncomfortable about going for a consultant right now. I don't think we have all the things we wanna do. I wanna ask this committee, we've talked about approaching groups like the Conservation Commission, like the Housing Trust. Are we comfortable in making those connections just to say, hey, we're getting going, this is an open-ended setting of the ground rules? Are we comfortable doing that, or are we waiting on that?
I'm neither.
I'm comfortable meeting strangers, so it doesn't matter.
Well, I think we need to just be clear on
you
what
know,
we're gonna be asking.
Margot has really emphasized to me, to our goal of really, and I've really heard this from her, and I'm crediting her with this, that to really get the best buy-in and make something that the town cares about and is useful, we want to be really unified in how we talk about it. And I think we're getting there. I don't know if we're quite there yet.
You've
That's
answered
only
my
one opinion, but I only one
I feel
opinion.
exactly the same way.
Yep.
We're not ready to go there yet.
Good.
No, but are we ready to start doing some straw model development for ourselves to review at the next meeting?
Sure.
For example, I think, I agree with you. I think we gotta get to some unified statement about what it is we're about and what we're asking
So
in
we're
some of
not-
the initial listening sessions. And it might be grabbing what's in the FAQ from the LCP, Natural Systems, Built Systems, what would be a nice straw model technique for having that first listening session with one of these stakeholder groups, and just bring it back to this group.
None of this work is wasted, however this unfolds, like your example of interacting with the business community, collecting your thoughts, putting that all together, none of this is wasted. And a lot is gonna happen, I think, in the next 6 weeks, just by virtue of a new planner and things like that, and we're organizing ourselves.
No,
Yeah.
my suggestion is part of that organizing, is
Yeah.
to be creating something in draft mode that we
Put
kick
it in the
around,
drive.
because that's, okay, then
Yeah.
that's what we need to do.
I think that Jeff had made the point at one of our earlier meetings that, the old comprehensive plan that, I forget what year it was done, 2010?
11, 12,
Something like that.
11.
That not much had been done to implement it. And I think that happens because oftentimes a planning process gets disconnected from everybody else in town government that's working on various things. And they don't even know or realize that they have a role to play in implementing it. So part of what I think we need to do in talking to various town officials and town boards is to say, what we're trying to work on here is a blueprint for the future for the town, and there are gonna be specific actions that are gonna be assigned to all of us. And I don't mean all of us in this room, I mean throughout town hall and all of the boards and committees. And to get them interested. And so that, and involved, so that they are thinking not just, oh yeah, I'll give them some feedback in one meeting, but that they realize that this is going to be shaping what the town spends money on.
This is a living thing.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Just like Yarmouth,
Right.
this is how it's evolved. This is where it
Right.
started and evolved. I think we included in there, we want the consultant to be transparent in the process.
did. transparency in continuous building and plan document and process.
Bernadette, just because anything you would dream from this consultant that we're missing?
It's like too elusive. I want to get that actual person.
Pete, is there-
I think you've covered it.
Yeah.
Anything, I know you're gonna have a real.
I think one thing that a consultant should have is, and someone said something about experience on Cape Cod, but experience with either formulating zoning guide or design guidelines for a community on Cape Cod, right? Whether they're from the Cape, worked on the Cape or otherwise, or a coastal area, New England coastal area like Cape Cod, because I think that there will likely be some recommendations coming out of the LCP about either form-based design or zoning or how to plan for growth, which we cannot stop, we can only sort of harness.
Guide.
That's my personal.
It's great. No, it's a great point. Barbara, anything from a consultant that you would?
Personally, I think the two major component, well, I guess three if you want to include economic issues, housing is huge. I mean, if we don't get housing, control of housing, we're
Talked
doomed.
about
We're totally
somehow.
doomed.
Yes, yes.
And environmental, all encompassing environmental. So I truly believe that this consultant, and I kind of agree with David, is how far they can take us down, but
Right.
they at least need to take us a good way down into the visioning and maybe early on development of the plan itself. But to me, it narrows down to those three things, and a lot of everything else feeds up into all of those three things. And I guess my concern is that when you look at the other plans, is that nobody seems to have an answer for housing. So,
It's kind of to my dream point. I don't know how
Well,
useful it
it's-
is or whatever. Like, could you bring us some ideas?
I know, it's just.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I
Right.
mean, out of everything, that is the most non-tangible, and
Right.
that's the, what do they
Some
call it, the monster
willingness
in the
to-
room, or the
The
something in the
elephant in
room?
the
The rub.
Elephant in the
Yeah,
room.
yeah.
Yeah, the monster.
Garrett or anybody else who hasn't any dreams about your consultant before we take our break?
No, I'm good. I wrote my stuff in.
Okay, I love it.
Was
Please,
that-
Jim, yes.
No, there is all sorts of innovative stuff going around across the country. It has
Yes.
Huge.
Love to hear about that,
And,
personally.
You know, in some ways, I think the challenge is not gonna be, I mean, you'll learn a lot if someone takes you through it. It's really a question of are we going to allow it in the zoning and, you know, what do we really want? But there are options out there.
Yeah, no, I mean, Ed was telling me, and is super plugged into some things, talking about you were talking about the county level and stuff like that, that like, we should be hearing about. I mean, which I think actually even part of the visioning process and the LCP is additive to the community, that this is, the town is spending all this money to do this process, like, having meaningful dialogue with various ideas and expertise, maybe regionally or nationally, beyond the sort of echo chamber that we have, is money well spent for the town, and that's part of this process, right? So that's what we're asking for.
On
Yes,
the- on
before
the-
we take a break, go ahead.
On the housing issue, I think it's important that we find a consultant that can demonstrate that they understand the unique attributes of a place like Cape Cod. It's true of almost any resort area, that our housing market is driven not by the local economy, but by the second home market.
Right.
And so you can't build your way out with a market solution to ensure affordable housing, because what happens is you build it and the second home market comes in and gobbles it up.
Right.
And so that fundamental understanding of the dynamics of what we're facing here, I think is something we're looking for in a consultant.
With that, we're good to take a break? 5 minutes, just to collect ourselves, and then we'll go through Garrett's, just so we have kind of a organized, good?
Would be excused?
Yes. I give you Cookies were good, but they were very nice. Thank you. I would eat them.
And that's an environmental
That would be
because of
not good. Does anyone want some cookies? Please. Yeah, have a cookie or share. That's a sterile piece. Yeah. It was
If I ate one of those cookies, I'd be up
harvested
all night.
sterilely.
No, I'm good, thank you.
All right, folks, so,
I'm going home for a leftover turkey
You
dinner.
offered, so now you don't have to share. You
Yeah,
can
yep.
have the-
we have, yeah, there's plenty of cookie here. Thank you, Garrett. So, if Garrett, could you
You want me
maybe,
to send it to you?
or you can just talk us through it,
Sure.
and like, I can polish and we can share,
Yeah, why
but
don't
I just want to make sure that everyone like has the chance to kind of put their
Hear-
input and
Sure.
hear what we are valuing, understanding that this is going to be much more sophisticated in this
Sure.
presentation. But go ahead.
Yep, so the first point for what we're thinking for the consultant in part of the visioning process, transparency and experience with revision planning and continuous planning, or continuous building of plan document throughout the engagement. Sharing the most responsive ways to get town engagement. How do we get quantitative to qualitative? Come with ideas / proposals for town engagement, workshops, one-on-ones, need for multimodal responsiveness. And I think we also use the word like bring it to 2022. There's other ways of bringing in ideas. So need for representation across newer engagement models, but also populations. Consultant fit to town dynamics is extremely important. I think Ed shared that. Working knowledge of Cape Cod and experience working in Cape Cod. Integrate land use, capital planning processes injected into our plan. Housing strategies to address our town issues specifically. Ability to intake stakeholder conversations. Open space plan. I don't know why I wrote this, but I think this is a tangent. I'm not sure. Open space plan is out of date. Need to get an approved plan to achieve state funding, conservation administration, conservation commission, et cetera. I think this was how do we do it. Housing production plan and housing trust involvement. Right now, it's failing, is what I have. So having experience helping with that.
we don't want to go out with that description.
Hey, we'll refine this. We'll clean it up.
Just between us?
Yeah, that'll be in the RFP. Housing plan failing.
Put an asterisk.
Yeah, we don't mean it. We're naive. Project management skills,
Didn't realize volunteer.
experience with zoning, design guidelines for communities on Cape Cod or New England coastal areas like Cape Cod. Experience with three things: housing, environmental, and zoning. Seems to be a common theme. Civil engineering background. Experience with innovative technologies, frameworks, processes in planning of town development. And then the last point I had down here was second housing market understanding, resort town understanding, just innovative ways to accomplish the housing dynamics here in the town. Is there anything else we wanted
We
to?
recognize not gonna get somebody who does all
No, but, right.
Only other thing.
If they can solve housing, we're good, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I feel pretty good about that.
Just the pictures.
And it's really not tangible, is that our culture.
Oh, that's great.
We don't, I mean, our culture is super important to us. And
Yeah.
they need to, or we, the team needs to be aware of all of the above and understand, if A creates this, then may not be what we want as a town culturally moving forward. I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't wanna look like Atlantic City.
So when
They're
you're
not
talking
doing so
about
hot.
culture, you're talking about community character then?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so,
I mean,
I was
Cape,
thinking culture like arts and,
no, I'm sorry, no, as far as, why is Cape Cod so special?
yeah.
And then when you have that discussion, it's all of those things.
Yeah.
It is art, and it is land,
Right.
and it is people, and,
But
you
it's
know.
what makes Harwich, Harwich.
Right.
Right.
And when you talk about culture, I don't think of either of those things. I think the culture of our town is one where the folks that live here have a very hands-on feeling of how decisions get made.
Right.
and who
Right.
gets to make those decisions.
Right.
Some towns, it's more of a corporate,
Mm.
the five people you elect, they take care of everything and that's it.
Ooh,
Not in this town.
would it be applicable, because, we have an amazing committee with so much expertise. When I read the different RFPs, from what was it, was it Waltham or whatever? They were referencing their city council structure. Is it relevant that this consultant understand town meeting government?
Oh, yeah.
They should, right? That should be they should understand town meeting government, which, is like if you've worked on Cape Cod, but that's very different than the city council.
The people that will actually have to approve this
Right,
is town meeting.
right. So that's an important
Got it.
practical,
Experience with town meeting government.
right.
Luckily, it only requires a 50%, not
So I wonder if there are any consultants who would respond to this who would not have that. I'd be amazed.
I'd be surprised too, yeah.
So it's right, maybe it's an obvious point,
It's a
but,
New England thing.
Like if they've worked in New England, they should.
Yeah.
yeah.
It's really
Doesn't have to be
more and
done.
more a Massachusetts thing. Talk to folks that practice in Connecticut, and it's completely different.
So,
Yeah.
in our final 10 minutes, I think it's been very productive, and we're really, getting our feet under us as a committee, I would say, to editorialize and figuring out how to work together. Is there anything that anyone else wants to add to that?
Well, not so much to that, but on the sheet with stakeholders and subject matter experts, I haven't really, I missed last week.
That's all right.
So if you could add my name to town employees.
Yeah, I can,
And-
yep, please.
And
Uh-huh.
then, I guess, Garrett, you added some things below that?
I did, and I'm gonna come back and I can clean that up. Some of that is, we'll have to tidy that. It's more topics as opposed to stakeholders.
Okay.
But I'll keep building that out, and we'll keep coming back to that, because I think that's an important, even though it's largely an internal process right now, but I think that's useful work.
Well, if you want to,
If we are
one
going,
that reads coastal resources, regulatory environment, climate changes, if you want to put my name in there,
Okay.
too, that's fine.
Town employees for Ed, yes, thank you, thank you.
I just want to add, we need two in a box with those.
I
as
know
go
we do.
forward.
Yep, we're gonna need
just
to,
can't-
but
we-
we won't,
we shouldn't
we
allow-
won't bludgeon ourselves with it tonight, because it's,
just-
yeah, thank you.
But
No
you-
one should go
The
alone.
intent was,
Yes,
to
yes,
go in
that
pairs.
no one will go alone to the point of staying on
Yeah, the
message.
buddy
Yes.
system.
Buddy system.
Yes, the buddy system to environment.
exactly.
With that said, I think we have a thing, we've created a thing. For our final action, I would propose, or kind of just put out there for the committee's discussion and/or even a formal motion, that our town planner is coming next week. I will introduce ourselves as a group by email next week, and then either meet in person or, depending on however is appropriate, to convey these thoughts around what our values are in the RFP. Any discussion or counterpoints to that, or
Bring cookies.
Garrett's the cookie man.
Yeah, don't worry, I'll drop them off, you tell me where and when.
Do we need a motion for that, or no? Okay, we're good. Please, yeah.
This is, do you want a motion on that? Because I'm bringing up something else.
No.
No.
There's,
I don't think
there's,
we need it.
okay, group consensus, yes, please, go ahead.
Consensus.
Mhm.
If Joe Powers and the town council are actually working on drafting the RFP,
That was, yeah,
we might want to convey to them just some basic things, like the list that we've been talking about, but also to say that the committee has a consensus that they want to follow the Cape Cod Commission template, and maybe provide them with like Truro or Yarmouth.
They have access to our drive.
They do, but they won't look at it unless
Okay.
we rub their
All
noses.
right, I'll guide them. So you think, Yarmouth really stuck out to me, but yes, yes, I have to kind of, noodle on that a little bit.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah,
yes.
I realize that.
Yes.
It's a delicate thing.
Yes.
It would save everybody time
Yes.
if they knew that the committee felt strongly about these things.
Yes,
And so that they,
yes.
Could we say that the committee liked the transparency that, say, for example, the Yarmouth site doesn't mean it has to look exactly that way?
Right.
I think that's the point you're driving. We want to have transparency.
well, that's part of it, but it's more that, we've come up with kind of an organizational
Yes.
structure for
Yes.
the scope of work.
And we like the Cape Cod.
Yeah.
Yes,
yeah,
I guess,
so-
I agree, and I think there's nothing wrong, these minutes are gonna be, this meeting's recorded and everything, this is all public. In terms of the timing of pointing the flashlight, I just need to think on that for a
Yeah,
second.
yeah.
I'm certainly not hiding
Well-
it, but,
Right,
yeah,
right,
just with the planner starting next week, I have to
Yeah.
kind of think about that.
Yeah.
I think Margaret's point is, rather than just doing a local comprehensive plan and that we approve at town meeting and that's it, we want to do a plan that we can then submit to the Cape Cod Commission for their approval, which means that we have to
Yes.
contain
Hit these
the
points.
elements that they have in it. And the other thing, there was a brief mention of it. Do we want to, somebody suggested that rather than going right now and hiring the consultant that's gonna take us all the way through, but is simply hiring somebody to take us through the initial visioning step. And how do we feel about suggesting that?
In our remaining 4 minutes, do we want to throw that out there? 'Cause
Yeah.
yeah.
I love the idea. I think it's impractical and will slow us down, but I get it.
Yeah, okay.
But I'm glad we raised it, because I'd be thinking
It
the
was-
same thing, because I'm worried about not getting anything done in January, February.
I
March.
understand, but we persist is all I can say, and we're doing stuff. So, could you actually put that in our point of coming back to, because maybe this is a point for further discussion, as we interface with the committee, with town staff, what are the pros and cons of contracting for the vision only versus the whole process? So just put that as a to be decided, that would be
Okay.
my.
Can I ask a question? Margot, have any of the towns not followed the Cape Cod Commission guidelines
Yeah.
and?
Yes, yeah,
Our 2011
yes, I mean, yeah,
did not follow the guidelines
yeah.
at all.
So, it's really up to the town. And, the certification, as I said, the incentives in the Commission Act to be consistent are tools that are rarely used in planning. Development agreements and impact fees, they can be useful, but they're not used that much. So I don't see that as being the big incentive for trying to make a plan that's certifiable. I think the real reason is to think bigger than just our municipal boundaries, thinking about what do we share with our adjoining towns, and, to try to make our plan work
Oh,
across
abso-
town.
Gives us,
Right,
gives us
I was
common
just cu-
language
Yeah.
even to talk about these things.
Yeah.
Well, the problem is that we have, how many towns we have? 11? 15? Okay, we got more.
They grew.
Is that we're all on this ship together.
Right.
I mean, and
Yeah.
even though you've got the, Dennis here, Chatham there, Sandwich and everything, the point is that everybody's having almost this, we all have pretty much the same
Issues.
concerns, same challenges moving forward. I mean, there's no sense in not
Yeah.
Yeah,
working together.
exactly.
With that,
When is
our next meeting it's gonna be good. It's the new
January
year,
3rd.
January 3rd. And it is Tuesday, January 3rd from 5 to 7. We will be in the small room. We have we have Chloe Schaefer from the
Ooh, it's gonna be
commission
tight.
coming, or Chloe Schaefer and/or associate. And a lot is gonna be happening in the next month. Don't worry, Pete, we're gonna be doing things. And I'll keep you, all posted 100%. As soon as I knew something, you guys all know something.
Great,
I move to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you.
very, very nice job
Okay.
organizing the discussion.
Merry
Thank you.
Christmas all.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Yeah,
Happy New Year, Merry Christmas. Thank you all for your.
Folks